Alright, everybody, welcome to the Sandbox Podcast. It's a platform where we learn to lead well with other leaders. It's gonna be a good day. We are glad you're here. Happy New Week, Monday morning, everybody. Alright, here we go. Coming to you live from the good land, it is Tyler Richardson. I hope you are doing awesome, and welcome to the Sandbox Podcast. Once again, Happy New Week. I hope your Monday morning that is carrying you through the week and the week before has been wonderful. I pinched a nerve in my lower back, twisting and shouting, and it's been interesting times, constantly in anguish, but that's not a big deal. But what we want to talk about today, by the way, since I'm in full of anguish and full of pain, and I really hate medication, so I don't really got a lot of pain relievers in me, this podcast is going to be very specific. It's going to not have any of the usual quote-unquote fluff, and it's going to get right to the point. And we're all in it's an interesting time in the year because the newness of the year is kind of over, and it's kind of in the real rubber meets the road time frame of deciding what we're going to do with this year, who we're going to be, the decisions we're going to make, the goals we're going to set, maintain, and accomplish. And I think one of the things I really wanted to talk about in this podcast, knowing me, I'll probably do different aspects of this topic, but to start this topic, I really wanted to focus on mislabeling enemies. And this is what I mean by mislabeling enemies. For many years, I was involved at a place in Hamilton, Alabama with a lady named Karen Wheaton and a place called The Ramp. And one day I heard, we called her Miss Karen. So if I referred to her, you know what I'm talking about. One day Miss Karen, well, she's not dead. Let me also specify that because I'm definitely speaking of it like I'm speaking in her memory. One day Miss Karen was telling a story about just a situation that had been going on in her life. There was just a trying time that she and her family were just trying to get through and figure out what was next and how to let go and pick up new things while letting go old things and all this kind of stuff. And it was just a very trying time in her life, and it involved a whole lot of people. And while God was doing a healing work in her heart of letting that season go to pick up a new season, God was really doing, a surgery on her heart like he does with most of our hearts. And, well, all, not most, but all. And he spoke to her very clearly and said, "You have your anger misplaced. You have your anger set on people. And it's not people that did this. It's the enemy that did this." And the enemy, whatever you would like to label it, devil, Satan, hell, whatever you feel comfortable naming it. I usually just say the enemy. I like to keep it generic and not important. But the Lord was saying to Miss Karen that you have your anger misplaced and you have it on people. And your anger shouldn't be wrongfully misplaced. Not even that you shouldn't have anger, but if you're going to have anger, make sure it's not misplaced anger. Don't put your energy in the wrong bucket. And the enemy in this case is a very distinct enemy, and it's not people. And I think so often for a lot of us, we go through so many hurts and so many misunderstandings with our teams, with ourselves, with, for many of us, with churches and ministries in general. There's so many aspects and there's so many doors that are open where there's free reign for a lot of hurt to come in. That hurt may come through misunderstandings. It may come through all type of different avenues, but it hurts the same. And I think what happens is we all naturally just grasp a hold of someone to blame, and we put a name and a face on an enemy. The problem is that name and that face is usually a person. It's not the enemy. Does that make sense? It's not the actual enemy. It's not the person. I don't care how religious you are not, and how comfortable a lot of times we are with spiritual discussions. The reality is there's one enemy that's come to steal, kill, and destroy. There's not a second. So it's not like there's the enemy that comes to steal, kill, and destroy, and then there's the enemy over here that just comes to get on their nerves. No, there's one enemy, and that enemy is never a person. And it's very hard, I think, for us to really grasp, because we're like, I don't know about that, because I'm pretty sure that the one who said the mean things, did the wrong things, shut me out, gave me attitude, I'm pretty sure, all that stuff, I'm pretty sure that was a person. I don't remember a guy with a cape and horns and a pitchfork running through my office. I'm pretty sure it was Diane. Uh, and so that's where kind of the block happens in our imaginations to really conquer this stuff. And I think we have to really make up a decision in our minds to understand that oftentimes, if not almost all the time, our anger, our frustrations, our angst, or whatever it may be, is placed in the wrong direction. It's placed towards the wrong group. And the group is a very specific enemy that is out to take your joy, take your peace, take out your life, take out your purpose. All of that kind of stuff has nothing for you but lies and guilt and shame and deceit. And then there are people, and people are you, and they are me. And we're all in this thing. A lot of times it feels like we're just trying to not choke and not drown. And then other days it feels like everybody's trying to choke us or drown us. And then some days those people think that we're trying to do those things to them. And so when we're in this cloud of people, I think it's very distinct. It's a very distinct importance that we make sure that we do not mislabel our enemies. And I think this is one of the big things that kind of causes the problem is pain that comes from other people is something that is usually not a very short shelf life. It's usually something that goes on, in a lot of cases, decades, whether it be a church split or somebody who used to be involved with a group, with an organization or a ministry, or maybe even a friend group, and then they haven't talked in 40 or 50 years. They haven't spoken, not talking, but they have not spoken in 40, 50 years. And I think a lot of reasons for that is when we encounter pain with people, the situation, whether it be a blow up that comes that nobody saw coming and it just kind of sideswipes you, or if it's like little things that you didn't think mattered, but they happen like 50 times over 10 years. And by the 50th time on the first day of the 10th year, you can't take it anymore and you explode. That it could be that type of situation, or it could just be one big blow up situation that nobody really knows what caused it. I think the situation itself causes the pain, but I don't think the pain is the biggest issue because I think that's just life. I think we're all going to have misunderstandings and somebody's going to wake up on the wrong side of the bed and one person's not going to get their lunch on time and all this kind of stuff. And some days the stars are going to align and we're all just going to be grouchy. So I don't really think the pain itself is the issue because what usually causes the damage is the bitterness. And so if a situation causes the pain, but pain isn't the issue is the bitterness, I think we have to figure out where does the bitterness come from? And this is what I think the bitterness comes from. I think the bitterness comes from the idea that you will never get an apology. I have a lot of friends who have been done wrong by ministry, like almost every single person alive, in one way or another. And I think in kind of talking to them and understanding, even if it's 3 months after it happened or 3.5 years after it happened, I usually get the same tone. They're kind of over what happened, but they're not over it enough to want to come back around or text the individuals or have an idea of coming to a mutual gathering where everybody would kind of be there. And I think that bitterness that closes them off is not the fact that it happened, because again, they're over it that it happened. They've let it go. They moved on to the best of their ability. But the bitterness that happened comes from the idea that we don't think we'll ever get an apology. And I think the reason we don't ever think we'll get an apology is because it's been 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, 15, 20, 25, and we have not gotten an apology. Or our parents didn't get an apology, or our grandparents didn't get an apology. And so I think we've seen so many people just not finish the sentence of their time places, whether it be an organization, a team, or whatever. When we don't finish the sentences, it's interesting how you're done, but you're not done, if that makes sense. And then a simple conversation over coffee of, I may not be saying this the right way, but hey, I want to apologize. And I may not have, this may be 15 years too late, but I just want to let you know, like, I'm sorry that happened, blah, blah, blah. And then them just texting you back, being like, K, or texting you back and being like, oh, you too, meant to say something. Hope you're doing well. Time flies. Hope you're doing great. Whatever. And that's the end of the conversation. And something so small and so stupid, it's interesting how once the sentence is finished, the peace that really comes from it. So again, I think the situation, whatever it is, small, big, long, short, whatever, the situation can cause the pain, but the issue is not that we are going to have pain in our lives. The issue is the bitterness that forms. And what causes the bitterness is our imaginations going wild, assuming the fact that we will never get an apology. And the fact, for some of us, that we have ever yet to really receive one. And I think, and it's very interesting because I wish there was some kind of, if you're ever up at like 2:30 in the morning and some guy is selling water in a bag and he's telling you it's gonna solve all your problems. I really wish there was a bitterness water bag, a bitterness bag, a BB, if you will, for $14.95. I could probably buy, 3 just in case the first 2 don't take. And really solve the bitterness issue. And what I've learned over and over and over and over again, and I wish there was a different way to learn it, but it looks like it's the only way, is just intentionally dealing with it. Intentionally, gritting your teeth, putting all of your energy into shutting down all the voices in your head of how embarrassed you are, of how stupid you feel, of how they're going to make fun of you after you apologize, or that they may, scream at you when they answer the phone, or all the things that we come up with of the worst of the worst case scenarios of what would happen if we reached out. And I think, it's as many practical things as you can think of. I've heard of some people that sit a chair in a room and they imagine that individual, or maybe the several individuals, I guess you'd have to get a few chairs in that case, and they out loud apologize to those people in those chairs. Obviously, they're not in the room; they're empty chairs. But they visualize it, because for some cases they may be dead. In some cases, they may be on the other side of the world, or in some cases, they won't return your calls or text messages or whatever. And in those cases, you're wanting to make sure that you get as much of that poison out of your own soul as you can. And that's very tough. But I think if you intentionally open up your heart, and even in prayer and asking God, like, I want this bitterness out, what are the intentional practical things I can do right now? Maybe I can write a letter, maybe I can write an email, maybe I can just go to a church service or something and just be there and just be like, hey, just was here and wanted to say, hey, really enjoyed the service, blah, 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 whatever it is. The beauty about church and ministry is that you could have got screamed at for not cleaning the bathrooms, or you got screamed at because you stole $1 million from the accountant. It literally goes everywhere. But I think there's still an open door for all of us to really try. Because again, as always, there's 2 tests going on. You don't know how they're going to respond, but you do know that God is looking at how either you respond or how you start the conversation. And I wouldn't come in, saying, I can't believe you did this to me, and you start screaming your side of the story. I think we need to come in, and just hands open and be like, I'm sorry for anything I did. As wrong as you think you did something, or as wrong as you feel like only they did and you did nothing. I think the best way to get bitterness out is with humility. And I think humility, honestly, I think humility is the person who just doesn't quit and makes the first step and is constantly making the first step. And so if you do that with people, I think you'd be surprised what they would do with you in response. And then even with ourselves, I think bitterness is a two-way coin, or two-way street, but also 2 sides of the same coin. Sorry, I'm in immense pain with this back right now. It's distracting me. But I think there's also a bitterness with ourselves that we need to handle. And I know I went through a season where I don't really know the exact right way to word it, but the only way I can naturally word it is self-hatred. And I feel like self-hatred is too strong of a word, but that's the closest thing I can think of right now. But I remember I would read the Bible, and specifically in Psalms, there would be sections where the psalmist would write and would mention the enemy. And for some reason, every time I would read it, I would imagine myself as the enemy. There'd be a scripture like, this enemy, laughs at my face, and you can't stand this enemy, and he's always coming after me, and I feel like he's always winning and I'm never winning, and blah blah blah. For some reason when I would win that, for some reason when I would read that scripture, I wouldn't imagine myself as the writer. I would imagine myself as the enemy. It's just how I saw myself. Specifically at that time, in a very strong way. It was almost like any time the enemy was mentioned in a scripture, I never related to the person in the story on the opposite side of the enemy. I always related like I was the enemy in the story, either because of just horrible things I had done or things that had happened, even 10 years prior that I just feel like I just could not get out of my head. It was just a very interesting season for me. And so I feel like even in mislabeling enemies, that also includes ourselves as much as it includes other people. And I think, again, the situations, that we're involved with, even in just in ourselves, they cause the pain. But again, it's the exact same thing. There's a bitterness that goes, just like a bitterness goes with other people, there's a bitterness with ourselves. But I think the difference between ourselves and other people is the bitterness with other people is the fact that you don't think you'll ever get an apology. But I think the bitterness that happens with ourselves is because we know that we can never go back and redo something. We can never go back and take back an action, take back a word we said, take back letting down somebody who trusted you. You cannot go back in time and take that back. So the bitterness you cause with yourself comes from that. And I think that manifests itself in different ways, like shame and guilt and all this kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, I think the root of it is just bitterness with yourself, because you can't go back and redo it. It is what it is. You can't, as much as you try to, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and move forward, it doesn't change the fact of what you did, what you said, the attitude you had, the failures that you were in the middle of, all that kind of stuff. And so there's a bitterness with people because you don't think you'll get an apology for what they did to you. And then there's a bitterness with yourself because you know that you will never be able to go back and redo what you did to yourself. And again, I think it's the same thing. It's in some cases, like the chair example, where you set an imaginary person, or not an imaginary person, but you place a real person in a real scenario in a chair, imaginatively, and you say whatever you need to say. You did this. I'm mad that you did this. I can't believe you never acted like you were sorry. Then you verbally apologize, and even though you may feel stupid, I think you'd be surprised what it really does for you. And then I think in some cases you almost need to do it for yourself. You imagine yourself sitting in a chair, what you would say to yourself. I've kind of gotten into a zone lately where I've thought, if I had a son who had done some of the things I would do, if he came to me and talked to me, would my response be, well, yeah, that does suck, you're kind of screwed there? Or would my response be more along the lines of, I know it feels bad now, and I'm not saying it's not bad, but there's tomorrow, and then there's the day after that, and we can get past this and we can move on. And if I would say that to a son, or if I would even say that to somebody else who, wanted to talk to me and kind of vent, if that would be the natural response I would have, why am I so quick to hold that from myself? And if somebody comes to me because they're angry at a church that they had a falling out with, or an organization, or a boss, or a team, whatever, if my response to them would be so calm and rational, why would I not give myself that exact same advice? So I think what we really have to do is settle the dust of our soul. And I think to do that, I think we have to find practical ways. I think we need to find, if there's a book on forgiveness, or a podcast on, go to iTunes, search bar forgiveness, see what's there, see if you can find anything practical. I don't think there's a one size fits all for everybody, but I think there's something we can do that can really, again, settle the dust of the soul, to let go. Again, like we talked about before, unclenching the fists, learning to let go. I think while we're frustrated on the ruins of what was and what has been, we're kind of blinding ourselves that God has a brand new construction in mind on what could be. There's a new blueprint. There's something brand new in his mind that he wants to do. But all we're focused on is the fog caused by the smoke of the ruins all around us that either they caused to us or that we caused to us or maybe that we caused to each other. And I think there's something available that we have to be open to. Because, when your hands are clenched on, the remains of what was, whether that be memories, whether that be, once again, words said, attitudes had, whatever, then if they're so clenched on what was, and the failures that had been and all that kind of stuff, they can't be open to pick up new tools to build new things. And so intentionally make up your mind to forgive every day, even if you have to write down on a piece of paper every day when you wake up in the middle of the day around 12 o'clock and right before you go to sleep, I forgive so-and-so. And if you have to do that with yourself, do it anyway. And find a way intentionally, again, send that text, write a note to yourself if you have to. We have to find a way to stop mislabeling the enemies. We have to find a way to stop mislabeling the enemies. The enemy is not him. The enemy is not her. The enemy is not that church. The enemy is not that organization. The enemy is not yourself for the horrible things you did and the horrible mistakes you made. The enemy is somebody who has come to steal, kill, and destroy. And if somebody is stealing and killing, destroying, either your relationships or your future or the future of an organization or what have you, that enemy is not a person. I think we have to find it in ourselves to understand that the enemy is not and will not be in any situation. It doesn't matter how bad it is. It doesn't matter how long it's been going on. It doesn't matter how strenuous it is and how stressful it gets in the heat of the moment. We have to remember that our enemy is not in a boardroom. The enemy is not in, the car riding with us. The enemy is not a person. The enemy is someone who is under our feet as believers, or if not, you need to become a believer. We can talk about that later. Send us an email. But the enemy is somebody who is coming, but is somebody who is not a person. Is not a person, is not a person, is not a person. I'm not saying that there's not an enemy coming against us 24/7. There is. But the only way to properly combat that, to keep our sanity, to keep our relationships healthy and strong, is not by, in our frustrations, deciding to mislabel who that enemy is. So, I hope that helps. My back hurts so bad. If y'all could throw up some prayers for your boy, it would be oh so appreciated. I hope that helps. I know it's very hard for stuff like this because it's naturally, you kind of just want to be like, yeah, just get over it. And then when you're in the middle of it, you're like, I can't, Karen, I can't, Genevieve, I can't get over this. This is like the worst day of my life. Nobody understands how I hurt. And it's, when you're in it, you feel like nobody's ever been in it. And I fully understand that. And for some of you, you're in the worst case scenarios with organizations. And for some of you, you're in the worst case scenarios with yourself and you don't know where to start. You feel like they don't want to talk to you, or maybe you don't want to talk to them, or whatever it could be. Again, practically, YouTube, forgiveness. What does forgiveness look like? YouTube, boom, podcast. Quick ways to get forgiveness, boom. BarnesandNoble.com, 5 easy steps to forgiveness. What is it? Intentionally finding ways to really let forgiveness have its day in us, to have its day in our hearts, to have its day on our hands, and to have its day in its future. Will you immediately feel wonderful? Maybe. Will they respond in the most amazing way ever? It's possible. Could, none of those things happen, and it feels like it's going to get worse before it gets better? Yes. But you don't know. But once again, if there's 2 tests happening at the exact same time, let's just make sure we're passing the one that we're having. That's all we can do. When you're making up your decision to let go of things, to forgive yourself, to forgive others, to stop deciding, well, it's their fault that I'm in this situation and it's his fault that this is happening to me. When you decide to stop mislabeling your enemies and moving forward as best as you know how, then God will notice that you're trying your best to pass your tests. And what happens is sometimes passing your tests happens quicker than you realize. And then one day you'll be like, oh gosh, I'm taking a new test. That must mean I passed my old test. I didn't even realize it. But that only happens through intentionally making sure you can do everything in this time period to pass the one you're given. Let's stop mislabeling our enemies. Your enemy is not a person in any way stretch. It's not, your enemy is not a denomination. Your enemy is someone who is under our feet currently that has nothing but the worst intentions for you. So let's have the best intentions for those around us. We'll be better for it. Hope that helps. Again, check us out, harpandbold.org/sandbox. I'm hoping, and I can't wait for my back to feel better, because I'm sure the podcasts, once my back feels better, the podcast will be like light years more light and airy and fun, because these are just very heavy. But again, I want to help raise up people who lead leaders and not just lead people. And to do that, you got to do these things, and we got to pass the test. But I promise, we will all be better for it. We got Playground Rules. Hope you guys have, I've heard great things from some of y'all who are checking it out already. Playground Rules, it's free training. Check it out. If you go to harpandbold.org, there's a sandbox link. You're clicking on it. All the info is right there. It's free. You can print the stuff to help do notes for you and your team. Hope it all helps. Thank you very much. Subscribe to this podcast. If you're not subscribed yet, give it that little rating. Give it that little 5-star. Let us know how awesome it is. If you have horrible things to say, just don't say it. Just write it down and throw it in the sea of forgetfulness, because I don't want to see it, because I just am too fragile and I can't handle it. That's not true, but maybe it is. Who knows? But I don't want to have to now, work on mislabeling the enemy, because now I think you're the enemy because you're giving us bad reviews, and it's going to ruin the whole point of this talk. So, love you guys. Can't wait to talk to you soon. So many other things coming around the river bend, and we cannot wait about it. And let's all remember to play nice in the sandbox.